All right, everyone, remember Glenn Beck from The Blaze? You know, that website that's, I guess, was insolvent, had to cut a bunch of staff, and was underwhelming in its projections of the actual attention it was getting. I remember years ago, like we're talking maybe half a decade, I think, at this point, actually. I can't remember. When did The Blaze actually come into existence? It was shortly after Glenn Beck got sacked on Fox because his ratings tanked. They'd paid him way more than he was worth. He was funny for a couple of years, but then he devolved into every night it was him with a chalkboard talking about how George Soros was 10 steps removed from, like, the Oscar Mayer aliens or something, and it got really weird and out there. Glenn Beck's The Blaze gobbled up CRTV recently. Now, Glenn Beck is massively wealthy. The Blaze may be suffering severe attrition, and now CRTV is too. I'll explain that. But he himself is wealthy. Yes, he can buy a media firm. Like, he could probably go out and buy Salon tomorrow if he wanted. Massively, he's worth like $250 million, so no problem there. He bought up CRTV in order to fuse it with the Blaze TV. And Michelle Malkin, within a single day, walked off. So they lost one of their main people there. And she's a commentator, blogger, you know, consultant on Fox and so forth. Does various things. She's relatively well-known. Michelle Malkin, you mention her. Among most conservative circles, they'll know what you're talking about. Maybe outside of that. Other than policy wonks and people that talk about politics a lot, other people might not know who it is very much unless they're like, they watch Fox constantly, which, you know, I don't. But now they fired Gavin, which means the only heavy hitter they have left is Crowder, other than Glenn Beck himself, and Glenn Beck's, you know, not necessarily on that list anymore. He's sort of from the last decade. I would be surprised to see if Crowder bothers to, you know, continue dealing with CRTV, in all honesty. It's like at some point you'd say, well, I'm kind of bigger than this now anyway. The number of people who are commenting on CRTV's announcement to fire Gavin McKinnes, the number of people commenting there is vast. And virtually all of them are threatening to cancel their subscriptions or saying they already have. You're talking about a mass exodus of individuals, because not just Gavin, it's also Malkin. So anyone who's mainly watching their shit because they like one of those two figures is gone now. That's probably a large proportion of all the people that have a subscription to them. The problem is that no matter how wealthy Glenn Beck is, like you saw with The Blaze, you got a fundamentally good idea. You've got, you know, a fairly large amount of clout. You've got someone who's recognizable at the time, Beck, running it. Creating this so-called independent network, has a lot of people on that are relatively popular, and then over time though, it starts to get away from that independence it originally had and become just another neocon outlet. There are thousands of them. They're not entertaining, they're not interesting, they're not unique. Having an outlet that says, okay, we're centrist Republicans, kind of, sort of, but we're not totally on board with Trump, except Glenn Beck sung his praises when he came out and said, well, I'm not too comfortable with, like, what it was, a late-term abortion or something. Glenn Beck's like, oh, Jesus has been elected. It's a wonderful time. He's a very religious, supposedly, individual, has said, you know, cringy stuff before. Remember when he talked about the Black Robe Regiment and threatened to martyr himself back during the second term of Obama? A lot of people don't remember that. Hey, Glenn, I thought that you and tens of thousands of priests and imams and rabbis and shit were going to march on D.C. and lay down your lives for Jesus or something. That's basically what you threatened to do. That was around the time of the DC truckers, if I remember correctly. And I think Glenn Beck actually showed up with like 10 people and gave a speech and left, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it was some martyrdom, dude. We have a Black Robe Regiment. We are prepared to lay down our lives for our country in the face of satanic tyranny. Basically Obama or socialism or something. It's like, yeah, Obama's gone, dude. I guess as soon as the boogeyman was gone, Glenn Beck had to find something else to ramble about. So now what's happened is that all of these so-called center-right individuals, who are really just corporate sellouts and shills, now they would rather ramble about, like, oh my god, the new right is so scary. Like, and they'll lump it all together under the banner alt-right. Like, they do this to me too. And like to pretend that I'm associated with a movement that I'm not part of. And they do this because it allows them to target their smaller independent commentator sort of opponents. Yeah, that's really what's happening. I think people like Glenn Beck are afraid of YouTubers. I think they're afraid of bloggers because they realize that the upswelling of support for people who aren't controlled by a corporation is vast. I would say Crowder should consider cutting and running because you don't want to be attached to a brand that's already garnered a fairly negative reputation among people who probably have been part of it for some time. You know, you have a news organization. You got, you know, however many people watch it. Somebody new comes in, does stupid shit. All of a sudden, half the people stop supporting it. That brand becomes irreparably damaged. It needs to be rebranded over and over again. It can go into a death spiral because of this. It's like, oh, we'll reformat this and tweak this and rebrand this. Trust me, Crowder, you don't want to be part of a dying brand, because then you become a dying brand by default. It will take a toll on your overall capability to put your message out there. And it's not like he doesn't have the audience to go totally solo, and he could make his own media order if he wanted. He may not have Glenn Beck bucks, but I can't imagine the dude's doing too badly. His staff would follow him to the edge of the earth. So yeah, he should probably leave. But I feel sorry for Gavin, because I mean, he even like disavows himself from an order once it gets tarnished as extremist or whatever, which isn't entirely accurate according to government standards, but you know, I can understand the logic. And he just gets, you know, fucked over all the time. So now he's got to go work for someone else or do his independent thing. Although again, he's got a large enough audience, he could probably make that work. Yeah, we're at the point now where a person can be totally independent. They're not with a syndicate. They're not with a confederated media group or anything, and they can get by. They might not be able to live the penthouse of a Glenn Beck style existence. They may have to not get their extra copies of the Christmas sweater or whatever, but they can definitely make ends meet. My advice to alt media commentators: no matter how much of an audience you have, live below your means and try to scrape together savings just in case something does happen. I mean, we're at the point where people who are center-left are getting deplatformed because they said something a year ago or fucking 10 years ago at this point. By the way, Twitter's Jack making transphobic comments in 2006. Can't wait to talk about that. I didn't even know Twitter was around back then. Honestly, I thought Twitter came later than that. Twitter was made in 2006. I never heard of it till like, what, 2009 or so. I guess I was, you know, sort of late getting aboard. And so I'm glad that I was one of the early wave of people to get on all the alt tech sites. Other than Gab, I held out on there because it was like Twitter-like, and I'm like, I didn't even have a Twitter, but I'm very glad I've got it now. So yeah, Glenn Beck he now has CRTV. So if you're a CRTV like fan or something, remember, they're under new ownership, and that ownership just fired one of their major commentators and apparently alienated another one. Why? Michelle Malkin should explain why she left. Is it because she's like, oh shit, this toxic dude runs the company now. Fuck it, I'm going to have to leave. I don't want to be associated with that. Or was it because he's creepy? Because ultimately, with the Fox News crowd, you never know. That's about all. Peace out.